Well, good morning, and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I am your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. We're going to start the program with some updates, some comments from you that didn't make the cut yesterday. And also, I want to announce that I'm going to make an announcement. How's that? We got a big announcement coming up a little bit later on in the program. But before that, a comment from a viewer yesterday after the program. And I'd like to hear your take on this. This name has been thrown around on some short lists. Quote, I'm thinking that President Trump will pick Tulsi Gabbard as vice president. She has a winning attitude for America and has an air of calm, assertive wisdom that this country desperately needs. Now, if you recall, Tulsi Gabbard ran in the Democrat primaries last go-around, and I think she learned a thing or two about what happens when you don't go lockstep with the Democrat Party's talking points, and she received quite a bit of backlash, much like really Marianne Williamson in that sense, where both shocked at the media's coverage because Democrats aren't supposed to get that kind of coverage. So interesting, Tulsi Gabbard. Now, look at all these waves pouring in. Everybody's having a good Friday morning. Let's start with this comment before we take our first break. If you're not aware, the state legislature did pass the final congressional maps. This is a common theme on this program. It seems like we've talked about it for quite some time, but they did pass the final congressional maps, ending that lengthy redistricting effort just a few days after petitions started. I believe it passed yesterday. Petitions actually started on Tuesday, so probably not a lot of damage done. Well, Congressman Nick Langworthy weighed in on it, saying, hardworking New Yorkers deserve nothing less than fair and independent districting that accurately reflects their voices. In 2022, I was proud to lead the fight against the Hochulmander. I don't remember it being called that, but that's clever. Ensuring the strongest New York delegation in 20 years and capturing the House Republican majority, shaping the future of our nation. I'm pleased to see that our legislature has affirmed fair maps that honor the will of the voters while keeping the 23rd district mostly intact. I'm looking forward to representing Tioga County and communities in Niagara County next Congress. So that's how his has expanded or moved. That's Congressman Nick Langworthy. So he will still be, unless you're watching in Pennsylvania, most likely your congressman. All right, so that's our first update, and that's really, I think, our only New York State. No, there may be a quick New York State issue coming up. We're going to be talking about Trump and Biden's border wars, both going to the border yesterday. We're going to see what the mainstream media had to say about it. They're, in this case, CNN, the takeaways from those press conferences, if you will, or not press conferences, but just visits to the border. We also, when we come back, have two updates from stories we brought to you yesterday. Three updates, excuse me. So let's take our first break. Thank you to everybody sending in the waves. I'd love to hear from you. You see the number on the bottom of your screen. Make sure you weigh in on any of the topics. What did you think of Trump's speech at the border? What did you think of Biden's speech at the border? Who do you think won the so-called border wars? You can weigh in at any time. And let's take our first break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Another beautiful view of Market Street as we broadcast live from the Hesselson's studio. This is Frankly Speaking. All right, so I took that break a little early, so sit back and relax. We have a lot to get to. First of all, as an update from yesterday's program about Gavin Newsom, receiving a lot of pushback because his buddy, his old high school buddy and mega donor to his campaign, received a cutout in the minimum wage hike because he owns Panera. Let me give you a little background. California Governor Gavin Newsom fights for fast food workers' rights. Well, unless their bosses donate big to his campaign, like billionaire Panera Bread franchise owner Greg Flynn. This coming from the New York Post. And the title is called Panera Franchisees Gavin Newsom Payoff to Skirt Minimum Wage Law Shows Woke Policies, a Bake and a Fake. How else to explain the bizarre cave-out in California's $20 an hour fast food minimum wage, letting restaurants that bake and sell bread as a standalone item that dodges the blow of this law? How do you explain that? Flynn, who owns Panera Bread, the largest restaurant franchisee overall in the country and a major donor to Newsom, had publicly slammed the law. He reportedly lobbied Newsom's team to reconsider classifying Panera as a fast food chain at all. Instead, that's where we got the shady baked bread exemption. But court challenges left the law in legal limbo, and the state passed a slightly watered-down version last year, set to go into effect in April, with the same baked bread carve-out to save Panera Bread. That shows just how important this loophole, which insiders are saying it left a lot of insiders scratching their head, how important this loophole was to Newsom. The governor tried to explain it to the public as part of this sausage making. Nothing to see here. This is how things are done behind closed doors, all of that. Just normal give and take of politics and democracy. As a matter of fact, Flynn is 100% correct. Sky-high minimum wages at fast food chains hurt customers, franchise owners, and entry-level job seekers. So no law of this kind should ever get passed. But here California is, with one that shields Flynn and disadvantages his competitors. That's a pretty nice place to be for Flynn. Count it as fresh proof that most woke political victories come with a fat, greasy side of inside favoritism. That was from the New York Post editorial board. Yes, showing the hypocrisy there. Also coming at an interesting time when there has been so much talks of Newsom with his kind of shadow presidential campaign, and with the polls showing people are concerned about Biden's health. Just interesting timing on that news breaking. Also as an update, Mitch McConnell. We talked about him yesterday, and boy, it is the death of the Republican Party now that he is retiring from a leadership position. Well, who says that? The people that never want to see Republicans win, the people that want to see Republicans that are the old style Republican, which is cave to Democrats every whim. I think that's fair to say. According to Julian Zelzer, Mitch McConnell has bowed to political reality and announced that he is relinquishing his role as leader of Senate Republicans. And they go through what he said and all that. But make no mistake, Zelzer says, the announcement that he's leaving his powerful perch also reflects McConnell's realization that he is no longer in step with his increasingly fractious and Trump-oriented Republican caucus. News that he is stepping aside comes just a few weeks after suffering an embarrassing large number of defections on a vote he had backed to fund aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. His decision to cede the Senate minority leader's position should provide a clear answer to skeptics who doubted that the MAGA wing of the GOP had reached a tipping point in terms of the power it wields in the upper chamber of Congress. No one should doubt Trump and his acolytes, whose political muscle has led to a takeover of the GOP. Now, keep in mind, this same Julian Zelzer, the same CNN, the same legacy media could not stand Mitch McConnell. Now it's sad that he's leaving. He was the last kind of perhaps anti-Trump person in leadership. The truth is now painfully apparent, says Julian Zelzer. Trump and the GOP are one and the same. The anti-Trump coalition within the Republican Party is small and hanging on by a thread, and there's little chance of that changing in the short term. McConnell's decision to cede the leadership position is part of a broad and consistent pattern. Every major figure who tries to take on the Trump-oriented GOP faction ends up losing. So now it's not the Republican Party anymore. It's the MAGA wing. It's the Trump-oriented Republicans. And then he goes on to name other people who he deems as conservative. Like McConnell, he's deeming McConnell as conservative. I would like to preface this by saying I think McConnell did some pretty amazing things in his time as leadership. There's things I disagreed with as well, but there are some, if you look at what happened with Merrick Garland and some of the things with the courts, very influential. But he then goes to point to Nikki Haley, who he says is learning this lesson the hard way. Even though she has the ability to win the support of a sizable minority of voters in primaries and caucuses, has given a home to those who want to move in a different direction other than following the former president. So now Nikki Haley is winning sizable minority support, meaning the smaller votes. She's winning a sizable. I'm confused by that term. Support of a sizable minority of voters. I think the only person who would write that is someone that wants to see that person succeed, Nikki Haley, and defeat Trump. But I'll continue. The bottom line is that Haley keeps losing and Trump keeps winning. Despite an enormous flood of donor cash and the consolidation of the non-Trump vote behind her, she couldn't even win in her home state of South Carolina. Another Republican, and this is where it gets interesting, who is out in the cold given the party's Trumpy direction is Senator Mitt Romney of Utah, who is also a staunch conservative, writes Julian Zauser. Could have fooled me. Staunch conservative, the man who really Obamacare was emulated after with the Romney Care in Massachusetts. But that's interesting. A guy who jumped around and became a carpetbagger in different states to win. Staunch conservative in the traditional mold, meaning what's a conservative to those in the media in a traditional mold? It's the John McCain's, the Mavericks, the people that would side with Democrats more often than not, that would cave, that would go on media outlets and badmouth their fellow Republicans. And that's what they're going to miss about Mitt Romney. Because if they really cared about Mitt Romney, go back and look at the coverage of what happened when he ran for president. Did they really like him then? Was he a good guy then? That's the question I would ask. And he's a loyal party member. Romney repeatedly found himself out of step with the party's direction and frequently stood alone with taking a stand against Trump. Each time that Romney took what he considered a principled stand in opposition of the direction where his party was headed, he found that there was not many takers joining him. So a man that moved to Utah just to win the Senate seat, there wasn't a lot of people. I should also mention a man who, right before the election, essentially told people to vote for Hillary Clinton over Trump. So I guess that's this kind of staunch conservative that Julian Zelzer is talking about. But then the man who, when Trump won, begged to become, Secretary of State. And then when he didn't get it, went back to bad-mouthing Trump and going on to these outlets that really, really hated him when he ran for president, but being more than happy to be useful to them at that point. So McConnell, Haley, and Romney, as they put it in this piece, these three conservative stalwarts offer perhaps best evidence that traditional GOP loyalists are just not radical enough for the MAGA base. Not radical. Yes, Romney. Has Romney ever been considered radical, by the way? Or McConnell, for that instance? I'm not going to even knock Nikki Haley. I don't mind Nikki Haley. I think she's handled this very poorly the last few months. But, I mean, I think she was a conservative. And any illusion that there will change anytime soon and the party will revert back to the way it was in the pre-Trump era should be seen as just that. The new reality, now this is where Julian Zelzer and CNN, who never want to see a Republican win any elected office, who has no love lost for the Republicans, who now like them when they're quitting so that they can use it as an attack on Trump. Let's see what he thinks we should do as a party, shall we? The new reality of politics in Washington favors instability and dysfunction. One of our two major parties, the Grand Old Party, will continue to play partisan politics without adhering to any kind of rule book, and they will keep pushing the policy agenda even further to the right. You would never see them write that same thing, which would very easily be said about the left. They would never say that. The Democrats will continue to play partisan politics without adhering to any kind of rule book, and they'll keep pushing the policy agenda even further to the left. Never hear that. Never hear that. Voters later this year will have a chance to demonstrate whether they believe our democracy, and you're telling me talking points don't come directly from a certain party? Let's read that line again, even though I'm running late. Voters later this year will have a chance to demonstrate whether they believe our democracy can sustain this fraught and chaotic new status quo in our politics. I would say the only thing missing at the end of that piece by Julian Zelzer is this message approved by Joe Biden. We got to take a short break. I'm running late. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. All right, we are back. Frankly Speaking, we're getting a lot of waves. We're getting a lot of comments. How about this? Get rid of Romney and all fakes in government. And I don't know if it was a typo, though I don't think it was. Spelling Romney, Momney. Very similar to money. Yes. I don't think it's going out on a limb to say that Romney was very good at buying, in some ways, elections. Not saying illegally, but having the money to run, like for instance in Utah. Not his home state, but winning. We'll move along. Another comment from a viewer. Now the illegal invaders are labeled as newcomers by the Biden administration after his border visit. We're going to talk about that border visit. Keep those comments coming in. Thank you to all the viewers. And I would like to stress, too, if you're new to the program, you may not be aware, but it's not all just conservative comments. We'd love to hear your take on any of the issues of the day, Trump supporter, non-Trump supporter, Republican, Democrat. One last update from yesterday's program. We've been talking about the questionable tactics of the Biden administration when it comes to voter registration. You know, people were very critical on this program last week that Biden decided to forgive that student debt, $1.2 billion in student debt. People considering that kind of a payoff for votes for younger people because there's that apathy, that lack of energy for Biden with young people, especially because of his stance on Israel, which is very unfortunate and what that says about young people's mindsets. But I'll continue. There was also the story I brought to you yesterday where Vice President Harris said that they will offer college students jobs to go out and register voters, meaning young people, and try to, again, get that young vote. How about this? Healthcare.gov enrollees, meaning you may know it by its name, Obamacare to many. Healthcare.gov enrollees will also receive voter registration emails, says the vice president. And last year we had 21 million people enroll for coverage. So we're talking about a significant number of people, said the vice president. She told the leaders at this get-together that HHS will start emailing information on how to register to vote to everyone who enrolls in the ACA, Affordable Care Act, and said that the first email was actually sent last Friday. So there are our updates on stories from yesterday, and here we are nearly halfway through. Now let's get to the new stories of the day. Did you happen to catch President Biden's speech at the border? Did you happen to catch Trump's? I'd love to hear your opinion on it. Who won in the border battle? I found it interesting with Biden because we know he went to the border because polls show that immigration is the number one concern to voters. And we know that he does not have a good reputation when it comes to his border policy, the open, porous border. So we know he's trying to pull a Swazi here and blame the Republicans, which I think to some people that maybe are predisposed to liking Biden, that may work. But I think that most people will say, wait a minute, you've had 3 years. And by the way, over those 3 years, you've said there's nothing you can do, that you've done all you can possibly do. And now perhaps he's going to sign an executive order or I don't know. But what I found interesting, because I just got on a tangent there, is he shifted right from the beginning to climate change. He did get back to immigration, but started talking about climate change deniers. He began his remarks yesterday at the southern border in Texas by addressing a devastating wildfire in the state's panhandle, which makes sense, and in Oklahoma, I should say, before calling climate change deniers Neanderthals. I've flown over a lot of these wildfires since I've been president. Flown over more land burned to the ground, all the vegetation gone, more than the entire state of Maryland in square footage. The idea that there's no such thing as climate change, I love that, man. I love some of my Neanderthal friends who still think there's no climate change. Is that folksy talk still working, still resonating? I'm just I think a fair question. Come on, man. I love that, man. I love some of my Neanderthal friends who think there's no climate change. Now, after his brief climate change remarks, he further criticized Congress for failing to pass bipartisan border legislation. And what that means, if you're not aware, it means the Republicans haven't caved into the Democrats' demands on these, and we're going to talk about it in just a moment, what that exactly means, why that would be, what has been proposed would be detrimental. But he said the bill was on its way being passed, and it was derailed by rank-and-file politics. The U.S. needs to reconsider this bill, and those senators who oppose it need to set politics aside and pass it on the merits. Again, set politics aside is only ever done for one party. The majority of Republicans and Democrats in both houses support this legislation until someone came along and said, don't do that. It benefits the incumbent. That's a hell of a way to do business in America for such a serious problem. Serious problem that you just realized was serious a month or two ago when the polls started coming out. Then he urged President Trump to, quote, join me in telling Congress to pass a border security bill. Yeah, let's take a break. Okay, well, we got a lot of comments, a lot of waves coming in. Thank you. There we go. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. This is Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Hakem, and I'm so glad that you joined us this morning. Thank you for all the comments in the waves. Let's go through some of these comments. Number one from a viewer. Quote, I sell health insurance in multiple states. State-run exchanges already have us asking if they need assistance registering to vote. That will just be a part of the National Health Exchange now. Thank you for that. Thank you for, I don't know if that you'd call it clarification, but thank you for that emphasis on that. I'm not really surprised if you get any type of, really anything from New York State, it'll come with a voter registration. So that doesn't surprise me. I just wanted to mention it as a part of the broader picture of what we've been talking about through the week. So thank you for that. Next, Biden is the, quote, big man because Hunter testified so. Yes, after years of denial, Hunter Biden finally acknowledged that Joe Biden was, quote, the big guy in the $5 million China deal, but I will note he rejected the notion that the president has ever penciled in for a 10% stake. There's a really good piece on this. I don't know if we'll have an opportunity to get to all of that because it's a very in-depth story, and we've talked about it a lot in the past, but you can find it at the New York Post. One other comment. This is a great comment from a viewer. My daughter went to Syracuse and received her master's in journalism. Well, good for her because that's a great school. During her studies, she brought home a 2-inch thick book one weekend on journalistic law, which would be a substantial part of her finals. With such a substantial amount of laws and ethics requirements, that govern journalists, how do they get away with lying so much? That's a great question. I will say, and your daughter would know much more than me on this. I mean, I had to take a class on journalistic law as well. To me, it seems that the laws are set up in a way to protect journalists more than kind of dictate what they should and shouldn't be doing. So what I mean by that is, if they go after a public figure, say a president, former president, whatever, and their information isn't accurate, well, he's a public figure, and, there's not a lot of recourse there for a Trump or a Biden, whoever you want to name. So to me, it seems like journalistic law was more to protect the journalist than to kind of govern their ethics. Now, there is journalistic ethics, allegedly. So that, to your point, I'm not sure the answer to that. There's no real recourse when it comes to media's lies, as we've seen time and time again. So that's a very great point. A lot of great comments this morning. Okay, we're going to talk more about immigration, but I promised you at the beginning of the program I had a big announcement to make, and I want to make that announcement. So coming up, and some of you are going to find this very hard to believe, but coming up the week of March 11th, so not next week, the week after, it is the 1-year anniversary celebration of Frankly Speaking. We'll have been on the air officially 1 year on TV on March the 13th. So we decided to make it a special event. The whole week is going to be full of guests. We'll still find time for some topics, hopefully, but we'll also have a lot of time saved for you. Reach out, comment on topics you want to bring up, maybe potential future guests. And I would say if there's anybody you want to see, I know I'm going to get suggestions of big names, but anybody that you would like to see on the anniversary show, I can try. Right now, I will say we're averaging, waiting to hear from a few. I'm not going to give any away yet, but waiting to hear from a few people. But if my numbers are right now, we'll probably have 2 to 3 guests per day. So they won't be very long interviews, but they'll be kind of nice general interviews. So I think you're really going to enjoy it. March 11th through the 15th. That whole week is us celebrating 1 year on the air on television. So I hope that you will join us, and you'll see commercials for it, and you'll hear me talk about it quite a bit, I know. But I wanted to be the first to tell you before you saw the promos running over the weekend and all next week. So, yes, any suggestions for the anniversary show? I'd love to hear from you. I'm really excited about it. It's hard to believe it's been a year. It's been a fun year. I thank everybody who have been there from the beginning or just found us. Anybody who tunes in and shares their time with me. I appreciate it. Okay, let's take a break so I can focus more on immigration when we come back. One other quick announcement aside from the anniversary show. On Monday's show, we're going to be talking to Eddie Van Stein. He's the Steuben County Mobility Manager, so that'll be on Monday. We've got a lot of guests next week lined up as well, so you'll just have to tune in all week. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thank you again for joining us here on Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I knew when I said suggestions for the anniversary show, and I appreciate every suggestion, but when I said I know you're going to ask for some big names, which I'll always try to do, I knew this was going to be the first one out of the gate. Try and get Trump again. That is a memorable day from radio days. Yes, if you're not familiar with my past work, that was from the radio days. I had Trump. And just to give you a little background on why that probably won't happen right now, that interview was live. It was in April. It was right around the primary here in New York. If you recall, at that time, it was still Trump and Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz had stayed in it, and it wasn't a sure thing. Trump looked like he was going to get it, but it wasn't a sure thing. So we had a lot of Cruz surrogates at that point. I had his father on the program. I had Carly Fiorina, his VP. I had quite a few other people. But then one day, Trump kind of blew that all out of the water and called me live, surprised me. I did not know he was calling. I'm sure you can find it online somewhere, but that's a great story, and that was a fun time. But thank you for that suggestion. I may wait and try to get that closer to Election Day if he secures the nomination. And I would also say, in the issue of fairness, because that's what I believe in here, if the Biden administration or Gavin Newsom administration, depending on what time of year it is, if they want to contact me, I'd love to have you on the program as well, or RFK Jr. And I know all four of these people that I just mentioned watch this show every morning, I'm sure. So pass the word on. Get a hold of my people, which is me. Here's another comment from a viewer. Talk about journalistic law. A court ruling found veteran TV news correspondent Catherine Heritage in civil contempt for refusing to identify sources related to a 2017 investigation she reported for Fox News. Yes, and if you recall, that's the... She was a CBS reporter who was fired. She was the only one reporting at CBS on the Hunter Biden story, and she said that she was receiving pushback for that because they didn't really want her to cover it. But she, with kind of a journalistic backbone, she went ahead with it anyway. Well, they laid off, I think, 20-some people at CBS. She was one of them. A lot of people outraged. They were outraged because she had this First Amendment battle going on. A lot of different reasons they were mad. Then CBS has the audacity to confiscate her personal computer and personal information and not give it back until really the you-know-what hit the fan and they started getting coverage. So, yes, that's a great example of that. Back to immigration. Now, the sad, tragic story of Laken Riley's death, which has sparked outrage, and rightfully so. The press secretary, Jean-Pierre, was asked a question on CNN News Central. One of the things that and this is by John Berman, one of the things that some Americans are focused on are crimes that are allegedly being committed by migrants who are in the country illegally. There was a death of Laken Riley in Georgia. There's been an arrest made there. Republicans are directly blaming President Biden for this. Senator Josh Hawley said these deaths are on him. What's the White House's response to that? I've got to say, Press Secretary Jean-Pierre reminds me very much of Vice President Kamala Harris, where they start a sentence and they don't know where to finish it sometimes. So reading this, I apologize if I don't do a good job with it. She said, so first of all, I want to offer our condolences to the family of Laken. This is a horrific, horrific loss for a family, for any family. And obviously, whoever is found guilty, we need to make sure that happens. Pardon me. And obviously, whoever is found guilty, we need to make sure that happens. And obviously, we don't want to see anything happen like that again. But here's the thing. We have done the work, meaning the Biden administration. We have done the work to make sure we're dealing with a broken immigration system. The Republicans have gotten in the way. They have gotten in the way, and that's why we continue to see over and over and over again. And so, look, this is a serious matter. That's why the president's going to the border. The president was at the border a year ago in El Paso, visiting the border back in January 2023. He put forward a comprehensive immigration policy on day one. The folks who are getting in the way here are Republicans. They are getting in the way. And they're doing it because of what Donald Trump is telling them to do for their own political gain. And so this is where we are right now. So the president's going to take it directly to the American people. He's going to hear from people who are directly impacted by what's happening with this broken immigration system. This broken immigration system, he campaigned on day one getting rid of the executive orders from Trump. That's what led to this. So the broken immigration system is directly tied in to Biden, and now Biden's saying we've got to fix it and blaming Republicans. Interesting how that happens when the polls start showing that this is a real negative for the administration. But the president is not going to stop, she continued. He's not going to stop because this is not about politics. It's about the American people and what they want to see coming out of Washington, D.C. So they've done the work. By the way, I saw that, speaking of that, oh man, heartbreaking Laken Riley murder, Trump did speak with the devastated angel parents of the incredible Laken Riley. Reports have come out, Trump said, and we've been covering them, and everybody's been, and I spoke to the parents of an incredible young lady. And you saw her the other day. You saw what happened the other day in Georgia. And the parents are devastated. They're incredible people. This is a Biden invasion over the past 3 years. He's the worst president our country has ever had, probably the most incompetent president we've ever had. And he called it a Joe Biden invasion when Trump was at the Texas border. That is his term for it. He also said, this was at an exclusive interview with Hannity, where former President Trump spoke of this. He said, we have a lot coming in, meaning across the border, from Iran. We have a lot coming in from places we're fighting right now. And Mexico is doing nothing to help us. They're letting the caravans come unimpeded. Something has to be done. You don't see women. You don't see men much older than that. It's from 18 to 25 or 26 years old. The only good thing is it makes our prisoners look like very nice people. I'll tell you, because these are rough people that are coming in. If you come in illegally into our country, you get things, and that is why they're coming. The incentive is so great. Now, CNN put together, and I'm going to talk about it after break, but CNN put together their takeaways, and you'll, if you're new to the program, you'll see that I try to bring up CNN's takeaways when they have a big event, just to see how the media very often is spinning something. So we'll take a look at that. We have a couple other comments regarding this, so you want to stay with us. Plenty to talk about, and we've got some other. Oh, here's a good point, because I do have 1 second. And where was Kamala, meaning Vice President Harris, the border czar? Where's she been? Such lies. Who believes this nonsense? Yeah, I know they're doing the work. Isn't that interesting about Harris? It's almost like, have you ever worked with somebody where the boss says, "Hey, you've got to get this report done in a week," and the person just doesn't do it, pretends it's not gonna come back up. That's almost what it feels like with Harris. Hey, Harris, you're in charge of the border. We're going to give you this. Things haven't been going so good with the optics. You haven't been doing that much in the administration. You're not a fan favorite. So we're going to give you a major issue, and you're going to be our border czar. Good luck. And it's almost as if she said, I'm in over my head, so I'm just not going to do it. Right? I can't think of it. Do you equate her? Remember, she's in charge of border security in a way. I mean, that's kind of that's what the administration gave her. Do you even equate her with the border at all? I don't know. I think that's a fair question. We're going to take our break now. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We received this comment from a viewer asking the question, not asking, but saying that, Biden wants help from Republicans, but someone will have to tell him that he has to stop cutting border wire first. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because there's a piece by Andrew Arthur, and he talks about this directly, and it's at the New York Post, and they show how successful that wire was in Texas. Apprehensions in that area that they were mentioning fell from 30,000 plus in January of 2022 to about 15,000 1 year later, and then 7,500 this January. That's still high numbers, but something to keep in mind. So this is where I bring it up. They call it the dog that caught the car. Overall, rank and file agents are grateful for Texas's aid, but the state's wire barriers there rankled somebody in Biden's Department of Homeland Security. So agents were ordered to cut and remove them last September. Texas sued to stop that destruction. So the Justice Department went to the Supreme Court to win the administration's right to keep cutting Texas's wire. While the justices were deliberating, Texas upped the ante and seized Shelby Park, a border recreation area, and laid down even more wire. By the time the courts ruled in Biden's favor, 12 days later, he must have felt like the dog that caught the car. The legal battle to destroy the wire barriers undermined his claims that he was doing all he could to secure the border. Yes, the optics were, we're trying to secure the border. Hey guys, go cut the wires down, right? You'll notice, and this is why I bring it up to comment on our viewers' comment, you'll notice DHS hasn't touched the wire since the justices ruled. Yes, they realized how bad the optics were, because they were they were saying that they were doing one thing, which is trying to secure the border, trying to protect us. And on the other hand, everybody's visually seeing them cutting down the wires. So they said, we got to get rid of that. Even though we won the court case, let's not do that anymore. Shelby Park is the new Alamo, and Biden doesn't want to be seen as a modern-day Santa Ana. We've got some other things on this article that I'm going to get to, but let's go to CNN's takeaways quickly. Biden makes an overture to Trump as he tries to seize a political opening. Yes, he addressed Trump and said, why don't we get together and get this done? Trump ripped into Biden's border handling, blaming him directly for alleged migrant crimes. Now, this is where I find it interesting because remember, it's CNN. They talked about the sad Laken Hope Riley murder. Trump said the monster charged in the death is an illegal alien migrant who was led into our country and released into our communities by crooked Joe Biden. This is why I bring it up, because this is what CNN does. Research has shown there is no correlation between immigrants and crime. Immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than citizens. He stoked further fear about migrants entering the United States, saying, quote, we have languages coming into our country. We have nobody that even speaks those languages. They're truly foreign languages. Nobody speaks them. Trump repeated exaggerations he made about the amount of border wall erected during his administration. He claimed Thursday that 571 miles of border wall was built during his presidency, when his reality fewer than 500. And the other takeaway before I get into that, no executive actions announced from Biden. So why I bring this up, and we go back to the New York Post piece, even though I'm running late. This killing, obviously, so sad, has sparked a debate over whether illegal migrants commit more or fewer crimes than Americans. The Washington Post fact checker weighed the evidence, including an analysis from my employer, because this is Andrew Arthur for the Center for Immigration Studies, which found the data suggested more. They committed more crimes, and concluded on Thursday that, quote, the results can remain subject to dispute and interpretation. Not if you read it the way CNN presented it just seconds ago. That's not only not helpful, says Arthur, but it also misses two key points. First, legal immigrants show that they have clean records before they're allowed in. Illegal migrants don't. And the vetting DHS does before it releases them depends on its ability to access their records back home. Venezuela's government has no interest in helping us. Second, every illegal migrant crime is preventable. If migrant criminals weren't released, they couldn't prey on Americans, citizens, and lawful immigrants alike. Let's take that second to last break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. And we are back with Frankly Speaking, wrapping up our discussion on illegal immigration. Senate Republicans are warming up to the Mayorkas impeachment trial over the border concerns, as some were speaking out saying now there's no impeachment, no sense for this, and now realizing that it is a major political issue. Governor Hochul says she doesn't want to highlight migrants who commit crimes and won't call for tougher New York City sanctuary laws because Mayor Adams is. She's saying, no, kind of nothing to see here. What I would say is the state of New York has a different sanctuary policy, and she doesn't want to highlight migrants who commit crimes. We had someone write in saying that exact point, that the numbers, that CNN article saying the illegal migrants don't commit more crimes. But if you read between the lines, what they're saying is it was not what CNN said. That's what they said. The actual research says that yes, they do commit more crimes, but it's disputable, the numbers. So it's, it's depending on what political affiliation you're with. All right, next. Oh, hey, here's a comment. Again, knowing, I can't wait to see what is next when I get a compliment like this. Frank for New York governor. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And no sanctuary cities. Yeah. Boy, that backfired for some areas. Absolutely. Okay, thank you for those comments. I will not declare that I'm running for governor at this point. But you never say, I've learned in this political world, you never say never. Isn't that what you have to say as a politician? Okay, let's go through some things quickly because I have to take another short break. There's a piece from the New York Post that says the data proves it. The Trump tax cuts soaked the rich. This is interesting because it kind of goes against what you would think, or at least you've been told. But while President Trump entered office, the richest 1% of tax filers, $675,000 of income and above, paid a little more than 40% of the income tax collected. With the Trump tax cuts in 2017, the highest federal tax rate to 37% from 42%. So Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders then is now condemned this as a giveaway to the rich. But the most recent IRS tax return data confirms that even as these rates were lowered, not to mention the corporate tax rates cut from 35 to 21, the share of the tax burden shouldered by the 1% rose to almost 46%. I know numbers are difficult, so I'm going to put up the kind of the screen, the poll on your screen. And it happens every time, and there should be no surprise, says Arthur Laffer and Stephen Moore. This inverse relationship between tax rates and taxes paid seems counterintuitive and almost mathematically impossible. But why? First, when tax rates are high, deductions to avoid paying those high rates become far more attractive to high-income earners, and they creep into the system as sure as crumbs on the kitchen floor attract mice. We find it highly ironic the same Democrats who want to raise the federal tax rate to 50, 60, 70% and make the rich pay for their fair share are also the loudest voices in Congress for bringing back the biggest tax favors for the super rich ever devised, the deductibility of state and local taxes, like green energy write-offs, things like that as well. High tax rates also send economic activity and taxable income offshore to lower tax nations. And finally, high tax rates act as a financial penalty on economic activity and investment, which slows growth. When that happens, there are fewer rich people with smaller income gains to siphon off. Interesting. All right, we got to take another break. Last break. Then we're going to wrap things up. Stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio, nearly out of time. Thank you for that message. I've started reading it about global warming. I appreciate it. You're right. I won't have time on today's broadcast, but I look forward to doing the research on that. So thank you. All right. Maisie Phillip admitted it was a mistake not to seek Trump's endorsement in the New York special election race. And as we do on this program, we give all sides. I think that's a unique offering that we have here. James Carville, the Raging Cajun, says Trump is a very weak candidate and the Democrats have a huge advantage. How could you not have concern? Eugene McCarthy got 38% or something like that in New Hampshire, and Lyndon Johnson had to leave. Of course he is very weak, meaning Trump. That's something people have to understand. His primary numbers are weak and his fundraising numbers are even weaker. The Democrats have such an advantage right now and they don't appreciate it. They're all in angst about the Supreme Court, which I could have told them that was what they were going to do. We're in a very commanding position in terms of fundraising and also in terms of dissatisfaction with Trump among a significant part of the Republican Party. 30% is, I don't know, that ain't chopped liver. That's a lot of votes in our own party and your own party and what they're not getting. Again, I guess I'm confused. I understand what people are saying. That's a high number in a way, but primary, that doesn't mean those people that don't vote for Trump can't vote for Trump. I don't know. Carville also said the stuff in Gaza is a problem for Biden, and it's a pretty big problem that a lot of people, and particularly a lot of Democrats that are uncomfortable, and it turned them out to the point that they would not vote for Biden. That was when we talked about the Michigan vote. But I'll tell you, if they don't get to stuff somehow or another, de-escalate in between now and the convention in Chicago, you don't want to imagine what's going to happen there. All those cameras are going to draw people. I remember the 68 convention. It was something horrific. Yeah, isn't it ironic that it's in Chicago again? I'm saying if this stuff is not de-escalated in Gaza by the time of the Democrat convention, there will be protests, and very emotional and active protests. I don't know how much further it will be. I don't know if it'll be like 68, and maybe that's a low watermark for something like that. But there's real angst in this country. It's not just snot-nosed kids on campus. There's angst about the way this war is being executed. Wow, it's interesting. The Democrat Party kind of accepted that faction as being a much larger faction, the kind of anti-Israel position than we once thought. Wow, I'm out of time. Way out of time. Just looked at my clock. Should have done that earlier. Hey, thank you, everybody, for joining us. Join us Monday morning starting at 7 for Frankly Speaking, only on Big Fox.